America, Neil here from Geauga Firearms Academy. Thanks for watching. Today I'm going to cover a topic about weapons mounted lights and whether they're a good option or a bad option. So let's get going. Anytime we look at adding equipment or adding some component to our self-defense system or carry system, we have to look, how are we actually going to use this in a realistic scenario for self-defense? As an instructor, seeing people from zero to quite a bit of experience, it's always interesting to see how much people are influenced by sources like Hollywood. Now I get it, things look sexy in a movie. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be realistic in your self-defense plans, okay? In addition to that, just because you see, or in fact a unit like a law enforcement unit or military unit, SWAT team, something like that uses some piece of equipment, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the ideal component or piece of equipment for you, a civilian CCW carrier. So enter the weapon mounted light. So if you don't know, that's what these guys are, weapon mounted lights. There's a host of companies that make these, anywhere from the cheap crap from 29 bucks all the way up to hundreds of dollars depending on the brand. But essentially it's a light that mounts directly to your pistol. To be quite honest, I see very little value of a weapons mounted light for most civilian and CCW carriers. Okay, so why do I have one? Well, as an instructor, if I'm going to teach a class on low light or no light, obviously then that's the tool we're going to use. But reality is, that's not going to be used by your average carrier. I made a previous video on home defense plans, and I'll put a link down there so you can watch that one if you missed it. But essentially, realistically, we're going to be going from room A to room B. Room B is where we're going to, lock ourselves in, call 911, and let the law enforcement handle it. Now, this is probably the only realistic time, really, where you're going to be in a building, probably your house, I would assume, where you're going to be moving down in potentially a low or no light area, and you have the need for a light. Maybe your little child is in a room, or maybe it's somebody else. We don't know. But the bottom line is, think about this. Do you really foresee yourself taking your loaded weapon and going down a hallway or going into a room where little Timmy may be, and turn the light on to see the area while you're pointing your live gun at potentially your kid? Secondly, we look maybe when we're not inside our home. Keeping in mind that as civilians, if there's a potential scenario over there where there might be shady people or something looks suspicious, it's not your job to go pull your weapon out and go try to figure out what's going on. It's your job to keep yourself and your family safe, call law enforcement, and let them do their job. So the rules of engagement are completely different. The only time you're going to be pulling your firearm out realistically is when you believe you're about to receive serious bodily harm or death. Okay? So the situation already merits lethal force. At that point, we're way beyond investigating something with a light. Now, I'm by no means against lights. In fact, I think this is one of the most important pieces of equipment other than your firearm that you should be carrying with you every day, which is a good quality defensive flashlight. This is extremely important, obviously, for letting things up, but it's also important for potentially getting you out of danger without even having to draw your firearm. Now, it's imperative that we identify our threat before we even consider squeezing that trigger. Okay, so having this flashlight is very, very important. That said, mounting it to a pistol has very little usable applications, and you're talking about adding $75 to $300 to your system for equipment that basically renders that flashlight now useless unless it's a life or death scenario. I would much rather an end user spend that money on a good quality flashlight that they can use for many, many applications and potentially getting them out of harm's way before they even have to resort to lethal force. So I'm far more a proponent for a handheld flashlight than weapons mounted lights. In a later video, we'll actually go over some techniques that you can use for actually holding an independent flashlight from your gun that will help you. The one area that there is some exception here, and that's long guns, rifles. I have weapon lights on all my rifles that I use for home defense because that's a totally different scenario. Trying to hold a gun with one hand and a flashlight in the other, we're talking about long guns, AR-15s, what have you, that's a whole different scenario. I want to be able to control that firearm and have my light on. But again, that's going to be more of a scenario where we're defending a single point position rather than going around hunting, which is never a good idea. Alrighty guys, that's my take on weapons mounted lights. Hope it helped you out a little bit, maybe put things in perspective and potentially maybe even save you some money, or at least allotted some funds to buy something better than a weapons mounted light for your application. If you liked the video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. Feel free to comment, but don't fight. Until next time, remember, it's always better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.